price of what it costs for or the ransom that you have to pay has gone up over 177% over the last year. And, there was a question about whether COVID is causing all of that. When businesses shutting down, was there less of a target? So now they're asking for more money. But we see them going after hospitals and schools. And you think about, what they said originally about, look, we don't want to create problems for society. Well, you stop a hospital's computer system from working, you're causing a major problem. I mean, that becomes a major problem for society.
Welcome to the riskadvisor.com podcast. I'm Sal Lafreri, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Jim Henry. Before we begin, we'd like to remind each of you to subscribe to the show and to push the like button for us. Please leave your comments as they're important to us, and we also would love to know other topics that you'd like us to cover. So today's topic, we want to talk about the colonial pipeline and ransomware, what occurred with the pipeline potentially being shut down. And that raises the whole topic of ransomware and what's the real risks that you run into as a corporation or even a small company with ransomware. So, Jim, you've been following this over the weekend. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's quite some timing. I mean, I just get back from the PSA Tech conference, PSA being the organization of integrators in the industry, and it was all about the launch now in June of the security industry cybersecurity certificate, which is a certification for stakeholders in the security industry that validates that they are aware of how to drive defensively with against cybersecured threats. Yep.
How technical are you going to have to be?
It is suggested that a candidate, being that of a technician or a program manager, have 2 years worth of networking experience. It's not like this isn't like a full Cisco cert. It is geared toward the security industry and the applications in security industry. It's not for just the IT propeller heads. But it is and they've been, and SIA and PSA have worked together to come up with a question format that's very suitable to the applications for security. So initially there are 50 candidates that are volunteering to take the test and to confirm its appropriateness. And the full launch of this will be in June. And of course, who's going to forget this certification? In a year of a pandemic, and you come up with a certification named the Security Industry Cybersecured Certificate, initials being SICC or STIC. So, yeah, it is very timely. But yeah, here I am on the plane coming back. I land and then boom, we hear about the colonial attack. And whether it's ransomware or whether it is a nation state, people take notice. Nation states take notice. They see how vulnerable we left ourselves there, and we are to shut down something as critical as that. And all that does is encourage more misbehavior. Both on the private side as well as the nation states.
One of the things that I thought was kind of almost to the point of comedy. It's a serious topic, but it's almost to the point of comedy. Is what was reported on the BBC when they said that the dark side, who apparently took credit for this attack, They said that, our goal is to make money and not create problems for society. And it's just, we just wanted to make money. We really didn't want to cause harm. It's just stuff that just makes you shake your head and go, really? But with this,
well, if you want to look at the, I guess the silver lining, if it really was just a commercial pirating adventure and not a nation state, the fact that it happened and the fact that we were vulnerable to it and the fact that we have seen that we're vulnerable to it, the positive is maybe that will be a wake-up call that before there really is something far more serious than that, people understand this is serious and you have to protect yourselves. You have to ensure that you have the proper protocols in place, the proper cyber hygiene, and for your security systems, for our audience here, for that focus. Ensuring that you have, if there are certifications out there like the security industry, the new security industry cert, you should be requiring the stakeholders, the consultants, the integrators, the manufacturers to be compliant with these because, they're going to go after the lowest hanging fruit. And the best that you can do is to try and insulate yourself with those that are more literate than than their counterparts. And because the money you would save by not raising the bar and requiring these compliances isn't worth the money you'll be saving. Because when something goes bad, it's very expensive.
Well, I think, one of the things we have to look at with this is the types of organizations that are being hit. And, it's no longer, just businesses or major corporations. I mean, this is happening across the board. We had a guest on, Mike Bettigold, a while back, and we were talking about hacking, and we touched on ransomware really briefly. And he said, think about it. What winds up happening is they're just looking to make money, and they're just pumping this stuff out. And so, today it's not just the smaller businesses, but it's also starting to affect the schools, the hospitals. There was a statistic in some of the research we were doing before the show. The price of what it costs for the ransom that you have to pay has gone up over 177% over the last year. And, there was a question about whether COVID is causing all of that. When businesses shutting down, was there less of a target? So now they're asking for more money. But we see them going after hospitals and schools. And you think about, what they said originally about, look, we don't want to create problems for society. Well, you stop a hospital's computer system from working, you're causing a major problem. I mean, that becomes a major problem for society. So, I think I don't think we need to be questioning whether these guys have a conscience. Yeah. That's way down on their David Letterman top 10 list. It is. It is. Every time the ransoms get paid, they get incentivized to, stay in the business. So, until the governments around the world, align themselves to pursue and hold accountable, those individuals, and entities. In the case of government-sponsored, activities like this, or I'd call it terrorism. It's going to continue, and you've got to triangulate it. You've got to have the government's committed, to choking this off. You have to have businesses committed, to becoming more cyber conscious and cyber healthy, and you have to have the whole IT infrastructure in tune that that this is not going to go away unless it's choked away. One of the things again, looking into this and in the prep for the show, it was sort of interesting. Is it's not just guys that are doing this, hackers that are doing this to make money. What a lot of the research is showing is that the money that's being paid to the ransomware is going towards, problems with dealing with sexual exploitation and dealing with with child issues, and it just sort of it really does have like a really bad underbelly to this whole thing. But we want to get into some of the logistics and coming up. But first, we do want to take a quick break. We just wanted to mention and let everybody know that you're listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and me, Sal Lafreri. We invite you to comment on our blog at theriskadvisor.com and to subscribe and follow us in our social media. If you happen to be interested in having one or both of us do some consulting for you, or you want to talk to us about a problem you're having, please go to the webpage to set that up. So, Jim, let's get into a little bit of the logistics. Talking to a few of the folks that handle cyber in detail, and some of the folks from the FBI, talking to them about how this stuff comes on. And one of the simplest thing is, we'd love to think that this was some form of incredibly technical sort of an attack, but in reality, as they described it, it's basically something that you did. You went on a bad site, you did something, you went to a place you probably shouldn't have been going to, or you clicked on an email, and that's how it winds up getting on your system.
It is, it's always the lowest hanging fruit, is what they go after. And this is why, we talked about the cybersecurity certificate, for people that you have working on your security systems, as far as, contractors, servicing companies. But, it's crucially important that employees, are trained and retrained again and tested, by, internal experiments, phishing exercises internally, just to see that it's sinking in and that they are being cognizant, not to be, clicking onto emails that, are coming from what appears to be a person within the organization, but the email address is slightly different. Or if you get an email from somebody within the company that you don't normally, expect to get that from, you have to check first before you go, go clicking on that. And that's how it happens. And of course, once they penetrate in one area, then they can emulate, that email address and then really spawn it out within the company and make the breach, much more serious.
One of the things that I find sort of interesting in this, and remember multiple things to find interesting, but one of them that I think of, so you wind up with the ransomware on your system, so you wind up paying, right? That's a lot of the larger companies don't, and obviously they have the wherewithal and the means to be able to have an IT system, or they've had backups. So they figured out some sort of a way to deal with it. But some of the smaller victims in this, if you will, they wind up paying the money. And the question there is, well, gee, again, it goes back to what you said before. You're not dealing with somebody that's got a whole lot of credibility in this. Do they wind up giving you the access? And then let's assume you paid the money. Let's say they asked for 50,000, 100,000, 300, whatever the number is. You actually paid them the money and you get the access back. Aren't you still compromised? I mean, that would be the thing that would bother me the most is, all right, so we got our data back, but you don't know what the hell they did. And,
and you don't know whether there's another ticking time bomb within the data that you got back. So,
right.
Insulating yourself from having to deal with them by ensuring that you have frequent backups of your data. And for the smaller guys, so that they don't expose. That's why the little guys end up having to pay, because they don't have all the protocols in place. They're not doing as frequent backups. They don't have the redundancy, of their solutions, and they can't afford the time and money, to recreate it or to retrieve it. So. I would say that you need a really top-notch IT guy if you end up going that route and paying the ransom, is to really inspect what you're now retrieving in a way of your old data, to see that there isn't something embedded in there, or find a way to sanitize to sanitize that going forward. There's just no good answer to that. You just don't want to be in that position.
Yeah, and the other thing is, once you pay, what prevents them from coming back and doing it to you again? And they know that you're going to pay the first time. Mike had talked about it and said that, what winds up happening, they normally try, because they're doing this in volume, so they're normally looking to get some quick hits. So they'd rather get, $5,000 from 1,000 people than, trying to argue and negotiate with a larger company. And I guess all of that is true. And, as you look at this, you start to realize that there's really no right answer to it. If you pay, you get your material back, then what do you do? Is that been compromised in some fashion? Is the equipment that you've had been compromised? But one of the things that I hear from clients is that they have, and especially the smaller clients, have this concept that insurance is going to be there for them. And in conversations that I've had with some of the leading underwriters, leading underwriting companies, they're advising along the lines that forget about cyber policies anymore. You're not going to be able to buy a cyber policy. The insurance companies have taken such a hit because they really didn't understand the risk. They didn't understand the magnitude of what could occur. And as a result of that, they wrote these policies, didn't charge enough, and now have gotten caught so short that basically what they're going to do is that they're going to stop writing those policies. And that's going to be really problematic, especially for the smaller companies. When you're relying on at least that backstop to be able to help you, it's not going to be there. And that's something that you got to keep in mind. As a client, they have to keep that in mind, that you may not have that backstop available for you.
You're right. They took such a hit that it's just not a matter of raising the rates of the policies, like they do to cover insurance fraud, on the like for healthcare and, things of that nature. But, in this case, it's so astronomical. And in many cases, it is preventable. So rather than getting into all of the exclusions and audit and oversight of your cyber protocol or whatnot, they're just saying, we're just not going to do this. It's too insurance companies need to deal with something that has some predictability to it, so that they can look at the metrics and and analyze that they can make money. This is just Russian roulette with way too many bullets in the gun. And big bullets. So, and maybe again, that's another silver lining there. If people realize that they don't have that backstop, that this risk is out there, and that there are ways that they can mitigate, they can immunize themselves against this to a large degree. Nothing is 100%, but it's a hell of a lot better to be at 80 or 90% than zero. So, I think that all of these are wake-up calls to recognize that this is not a spectator sport here. All of the, the business owners and the C-level, individuals that are following us here on the show need to realize that the ball is in their court, and they can greatly mitigate their risk, and have really a better business operations, for it. But it does take time, it does take some money, training, and what have you. But it's really not an elective.
One of the things we're seeing now is this whole concept of double extortion, right? So they come in, they put ransomware on your systems, and you're locked in. You're trapped. So you wind up paying for it, and so you get your data back, and then you realize when you start looking through some of the systems that what winds up happening is they've taken the data from you. So, if they just lock you up and encrypt your files and don't want you to be able to get to them until you pay, and then unlock your files and give you the capability back, that's one thing. But what we're starting to hear and what we're starting to see is that this whole concept of double extortion. And in double extortion, you wind up with, you not only were you locked down, but they also exfiltrated some of your data, or all of your data. And then what they'll do is you hold you hostage to it. And now you have the extortion of, maybe some R&D that you've been doing that, wasn't maybe not what the results weren't coming out as you anticipated. And there would be troubling files if they got out. There were potentially, litigation, how you were going to react, or planning that you might have. Any one of those type of things, anything that would fit in as a sensitive document for you, they would now have the ability to put that information out. And now you wind up with the double extortion case. And that's something we're starting to see. And I mean, that's just, as a CEO, and I go back to, your role as a CEO to a public company. Those are things that, got to keep you up at nights. You have to wonder, how do we react? What do we do?
Yeah. Well, there's way too many, risks involved. And like you say, double, triple risks once you do get penetrated. And again, this is just common sense motivation, to take the steps, to insulate yourself from being the low-hanging fruit out there and being just another victim to, as an example of the consequences of hope being a strategy. It is not, in the immortal words of somebody.
Hope is not a strategy, as is worrying. What can I do? I'm going to worry. Okay, that's good. It works for you. Ain't going to solve anything, but hey, knock yourself out. We're going to take a quick break. We didn't want to talk about the solutions. We talk about the problem, we talk about logistics, then we're going to get into the solutions. So just remind everybody, you're listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and me, Sal Lafreri. We're going to invite you to comment on the blog at theriskadvisor.com. We want you to subscribe and follow us on our social media. If you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event, or you'd like to consult with us, please go to the webpage at theriskadvisor.com to set that up. So, Jim, let's talk a little bit about the solutions as we wind up the show here. You said it before. I think it's worthwhile repeating again and again and again. I think these small businesses especially need to prepare for these types of attacks, and they don't do it. And it's mind-boggling that this isn't front and center to them.
Well, it's not going to go away, and it's going to be more, as companies do take some steps to mitigate the risks, then the bar will be raised at how much more creative they do get. And again, until there's truly a worldwide coordination to thwart and hold these guys accountable. And I don't have high hopes of that being anything that's going to happen too soon. You have to be on top of this. You have to be cognizant of these breaches. You have to be communicating this out to your people. You have to be watchful of anybody that you have working on your systems, because there are, so many applications now that are riding on your IT network. And you have to be particularly, cognizant now that there's a big, frenzy to try and hire people. And as the economy is recovering from COVID, that means people are getting more aggressive in hiring people. It's not only just the retraining your old staff; it is really making sure that you onboard new staff with the culture of cyber health within your organization. Any of those people, I just can't imagine that in this day and age, somehow, some way, they're going to be touching internal communications, within the company and emails and what have you, or working on, company issued, PCs or what have you, or sending information from their private devices, to and from. They have to be cognizant of this, because that's an even greater level of exposure, bringing in people that, you have to assume that they've had zero, cyber training and what have you. So that's just another burden, on the challenge, the HR challenge now as we recover from COVID.
When you talk about, like foreign countries, foreign governments, stepping up to the plate and kind of holding them accountable. And we've seen this, right, in the practice, when you have countries that allow child exploitation and there's no crime for it, and it's actually a way of life, and you look at the things that go on there. This is nothing more than just an opportunity for business. And, if they don't find anything wrong with that, they sure as hell ain't going to find anything wrong with this.
Right.
So that really becomes, problematic. That's a much bigger issue about how do you control the internet and how do you control everything that's going on and, what would be allowed and what's not. But, from a local level, at least within the U.S., one of the biggest things that we see from clients, and we hear from this all the time until it's too late, and then they make the crisis call, is I don't have anything they want. Who wants my information? This is ridiculous. Well, it's wrong. You have money. That's what they want, right? It's not necessarily, an intellectual property theft. Right. I mean, that's a whole different area. Right. And we've done a show on a couple of shows, actually, where we've talked about people being able to, get bugged and, and wiretapped and how intellectual property is stolen from corporations. But, this takes it to the simplistic side one step further and says, people like, I don't have anything that they want. Why would they do that? Well, you got money, and if you're able to pay some money, that's what they're looking for is the money, especially if you're on the smaller side, the short side of this. So, from the solutions, what are the things that you can do? One of which, you got to be alert and you got to be aware. You got to know that this stuff happens, right? You got to realize that that can happen to you. Excuse me. More importantly, though, you have to remember that you have to restore and back up often. And how many times have we, and it's happened to every one of us, your hard drive on your laptop or your computer goes haywire, and all of a sudden you're in this like sinking feeling in your stomach that, God, I just lost everything that I was working on, that I never backed up. Right? And that just kind of goes along with what you had said, just you got to be on top of these things.
Yeah, no. And you're right. To say it a different way, I mean, your data is not directly, unless you're dealing with a cyber attack from a commercial competitor. The data is just a means to an end. It's all about the money, and that's why you've got to recognize that that's where it's going to eventually hit you in the pocketbook. So, making sure that you do appropriate, in your budget, monies for training, for the costs for deployment of systems on your app or applications on your system that are going to companies that are proving themselves to be up to speed with regards to cyber protocols and whatnot. And I hope that this visibility now on the security side, of what the security industry and PSA have come together on for this new cyber-secured certification. That's going to get a lot of acceptance and enthusiasm, I know, from the consulting industry. In fact, we look forward to doing another podcast here on this with a deeper dive on the details of that certification, within the next week or so. And I think that will be a living document. I think that program will expand, and the best way to have that flourish, is to have the consulting community, which is already heavily behind it, actually writing the requirements for that certification into specifications for projects going forward. And then the onus is on owners to ensure that when they hire a consultant that does require that those kinds of certs, don't allow your procurement processes to eliminate it, because it might be raising the cost of your project by a point or two. It's there for a purpose, and that is when you see projects that are going out that require that, and they're only going to companies that are certified, what that's going to do is to motivate even more companies to have their people achieve that certification. You want to reward good behavior, and you want to do the other for bad behavior. And that the worst thing to do, like paying money for ransom, is to be issuing out contracts that basically waive the requirements for certifications like that, because it'll just encourage, more behavior, more bottom feeders, and allow procurement departments, when they think they're saving money, they're actually putting their owners at risk by doing that.
The old pay me now, pay me later, right? You're going to pay one way or another, right? And going through some of the solutions, we were talking to Mike and our internal tech guy, and we were talking about it, and Mike saying, listen, one of the things you can do with your hard drive is you can split your hard drive, have it separated out, have it password protected, and then this way, what winds up happening is if you get ransomware, it's only on the other side of it, in essence, the public side of it. And we said, but that just really gets incredibly technical, right? And again, we're dealing in a lot of times, we're in these type of situations, we're dealing with people that don't have the IT or don't have that technical capability to be able to do that. So I said, you got to give us something that, a little bit more is, simple. And so one of the things that he talked about was the Western Digital systems that do the backup that a lot of us have. He said, the simple thing to do, keep it separate. Don't plug it into your computer. Don't plug it into your network. Almost air gap it so that it's not connected, so that if you do wind up with a problem, you can easily go back and just take your backup. But again, you need to, things that, recommendations on that is make sure that it's password protected. But again, how big of a pain in the ass does that become, where every time you got to get into something, you got to use a password, and then you got to make sure that you log out of it. And it's just incredibly frustrating and we all go through it, right? We all want to use the same password because we don't want to have to remember 1,000 passwords. and it just becomes problematic. And so you try and get some sort of a simplified, solution to it. And if you're a small enough system, take a couple of Western Digitals or some devices like that, and be able to do a local backup. So this way, if you do happen to get hit, at least now you got the most recent backup that you can go to. The other suggestion was with Windows. How many times and we see this in the systems that we deploy for access control, intrusion detection. How many times the software to them is just not updated, and that was another thing that a simple recommendation. Just have Windows run automatic updates just to keep it updated so that you do have the most recent that's put out there.
Right. And the other thing, again, we've had multiple shows here on the risks, that the internet brings you in general. Is if you don't need to go onto the internet, don't do it. Keep as many systems independent from it. With regards to the passwords, if you don't have a good memory, you've got too much of it, but you need to have long, complex passwords. There are products out there, password vaults and what have you, that will store them for you and insert them, as you log on to those. And on communications, we've had a couple of shows on secured private cellular networks that can be, audited for those encrypted communications, on critical systems, security systems and whatnot. So there's plenty of tools out there to enable you to insulate yourself from this exposure. I don't know exactly what did happen in the case of Colonial Pipeline. I mean, that would be a good learning tool, if we can understand that. Because again, we're not talking about a small company there. How did this happen? In many cases, it does. It's something simple, and they're certainly not all by themselves. It's happened to some very, very, very large and wealthy organizations. Nobody is impervious to this. But the smaller ones have less of an ability, like you say, to afford the cost, the ramifications, and the recovery. Yeah. It's just you just got to do what you can do with the education. That's the cheapest. Just keep it on the radar of all your employees and your new employees, and be cognizant of the changes in the industry now, that are bringing that level of awareness and that level of training of the people that would touch your systems.
Yeah. And obviously, if you're experiencing a situation like this, or you have more questions, feel free to pick up the phone, send us an email, ask us some questions. We're more than happy to chat with you about it. So I think, Jim, at that point, I think we're going to wrap this up. So we just want to remind everybody, you've been listening to the Risk Advisor podcast hosted by Jim Henry and me, Sal Lafreri. We're going to ask you again to subscribe to the show and like us on our social media sites. And please, if you know somebody that's not listening to the show and you happen to be, let them know. Please refer us over to them. We're going to remind you and ask you, if you're interested in having one or both of us speak at an upcoming event and like to consult, please go to the webpage, theriskadvisor.com, and set that up. And remember that you can hear the show on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, and of course, stream it at theriskadvisor.com. Thanks again for listening, and we hope you tune in next week.